Okay, so this is how to install MySQL. Um, Pretty simple. You can Google MySQL. What you're looking for is MySQL community. So what I did, because I happen to know what I'm doing, so I just went to mysql.com. It is in fact mysql.com. It's open source. Click on downloads, and you're looking for community. So, and specifically the community server. And what you really want here, I don't care about 64-bit, 32-bit, any of those things. What's really important is that you get the installer. More important than anything else, you got to get the installer. So I think this guy is in fact a 64-bit installer, by the way, because it works perfectly. Now, when you click on it, you have to sign in. Now, I have an Oracle Web account. You guys are students, so you get to do this for free anyway. But you create an Oracle account if you like. I already have one. I believe it fills in automatically for me. And you guys are students, so this should not be a concern. You click on download, bing, bing, bing. I already have it downloaded, so here it goes. We're just going to run it, install it. A couple things about this installation is it's going to try to install everything in its grandmother, which is fine, honestly, totally fine. But you want to be aware that MySQL is a full-fledged server. So you don't want to open up ports on the computer. You're going to, every time we connect to it, we're going to connect to it locally. And so that's fine. And MySQL should have installation options for those people with, trying to go back far enough, for those people with, of course, right? Automatically trying to go forward for me. It should have options for people that are not Windows users. If you have trouble installing it, let me know. But you can see they have options for other systems, Macs, Windows, whatever. Community server was built with that in mind. So it takes a while to install. So just be aware that I'm not going to pause the video. It's just a lot of this video is going to be us waiting for the installation tool. Okay, so we get to installer. I want to remind you that this is a full-fledged server. So we want the developer default. It's going to include everything we need, right? What's most important about this is the SQL server, the shell. If you want to use the command line, you don't need the router. You don't really need a workbench, and you don't need Visual Studio, the connectors. You do need the connector, excuse me, you need the Java connector. You don't really care about the tutorials or any of those things. You can click custom and then select the things that you want. For example, MySQL Server, you definitely want to install that. Application wise, you definitely want the workbench. Absolutely want the workbench. Maybe you don't want the shell. I doubt we'll use it because the workbench can let us do whatever we want to do, but the shell is a command line tool. And sometimes that just might be easier. So that's why I always install it. And then you do need the MySQL connector for Java. So I just usually install it. And then we can click next. You can install everything. It really doesn't matter. For me, the selected path already exists because, ta-da, I already actually installed it. And it says, I want to install it. I want to execute. Virtually all of MySQL's tools are going to have you do things and then decide whether or not you want to actually do it when it shows you what it's going to do. In our case, we want to execute and just wait for it to install. Note, I try to limit the things here. Not that I don't have the disk space. I just was trying to limit the number of things installed. Just because it's easier. We don't need the router because we're not going to be routing application servers. Not something we're going to need to use. We use Workbench so that we can have a GUI to do things like create a server and so forth. we can do everything via the shell if we chose to. However, I'm going to do things via the workbench primarily. I will hopefully get to show you a little bit about the shell, but probably not. Um, it's been a while since I've used it, and we don't really need to use it. What do we need to do? We need to create a server, and then we need to make sure we have users. What we're going to do is I'm going to create a user named Ruth that's going to have access to everything in a database. You're going to do the same thing, except you're going to use your last name. And then you're going to create a database using your last name, just like we did before. And you'll see how it works, but you want to make sure. No, I apologize. I did that wrong. We're going to create a user, and that you're going to create a user on your end that's going to have the same username as I am, but we're going to give him access to all schemas. We're going to give him full access. We're going to essentially make him a backup administrator, which means he'll be able to do anything with any of the databases, which is important because that way, when you turn your homework in, whether you use your database or use my database, none of that matters because since we're using the same username, we just use the username and password. Another point to make in mind, another point to keep in mind, we're going to have to set up administrator accounts and those type of things. That does not take long, fortunately. But you want to make sure that this is not accessible outside of your computer. If someone scans it in a coffee shop, we're not really focused on securing the system here. And so you really don't want to have this run as an actual server. It's a lot quicker, a lot easier just to do what we need to do in this class and not have to worry about things like securing the database and so forth. But the crazy news is because we're actually installing all the tools, we can actually get really fancy with the workbench. The workbench was designed to help you create a schema that allows you to create a really complicated schema. We don't care about that here. And I'm going to ignore it for the most part. Remember, everything we want to do in the code, if you want me to run your code and be able to run your code using your database schema and so forth, you need to make sure all of that is created. All of that is done in code. So you can use the tool at will. I'm not going to show you how to do it, but you can use the tool to create your tables and all those things. But you need to make sure that when I go to run your code and I go to create your tables and so forth in your homeworks and so forth, that no matter what happens, you have a setup database and a populate database so that I can run and then populate it with the same data or similar data. So that way, your code ran against that data. And as a result of running against that data, it'll work. So I apologize. This just takes this long to install. The shell is the longest. I don't know why. It's a simple GUI. It's really not that complicated. It's a GUI that simply connects to MySQL Server. There's really nothing special about that. Connector J, do we actually need it? No. We actually do not need it. Remember when we do imports via NetBeans, we're actually going to use the Maven repository system. And so we're going to actually be able to find that way. So we don't typically need to have the connector local in any way, shape, or form. We're going to use the connector from the Maven repository. And I think one of the reasons why it was so slow in class the other day is I think I have a slow repository, which I need to adjust. But unfortunately, when am I supposed to have the time to do that, I suppose. So I'll just go with the slow one. It's slow because I'm opening NetBeans and so forth. I'm going to actually close NetBeans. We don't need it open right now. Make sure nothing else is running. No antivirus or anything like that is running. Yeah, Zoom recorder is happening. Close the window. Uh, and show details. Wonder if it hung. I hope not. Not while I'm recording. I did this installation twice just to make sure it worked. Um, wow. All right, I'm gonna let it go for another 10-ish seconds, and then I'm just gonna pause the recording and let it finish on its own. It did not take this long, so I have no idea. Um, Literally, it's a simple command line interface. The shell is a simple command line interface um, that allows you to access the database very, very easily. Um, there really isn't much to do here, which is why I'm a little annoyed that it's taking so long. But yeah, it's changing. It's copying directories, copying files, so it's doing something. It's not frozen. It's just slow. But anyway, I am going to pause the recording. There's no reason for you guys to have to wait, so I'm going to pause the recording. We'll come back in short order when this is finished.